Welcome to the Revealed Podcast. This is your host, Angie Durham. This podcast is all about you revealing your story and how God revealed himself in your story. And today I am joined by Lizz Rich. And Liz, you and I kind of have a funny story about how we met. And I always like to tie that into everything. And so y'all don't laugh. This old lady here that does this podcast, I have gotten on TikTok. And Liz's, for me, or they call it For Your Page, came across my feed. And I was just intrigued when I started hearing your story. So we're going to talk a lot about some things that can be kind of heavy. And before we do that, just to break the ice, I always like to ask people a random question. So the random question for you, Liz, is if you could work as an assistant to anyone for a year, who would you choose?
I don't specifically know anyone's name, but a motivational speaker that could show me the ropes of how to take to the stage for a greater audience to help as many women as I possibly could that are suffering through the same things and trials and trauma that I intimately know the depths of. So just a mentor that could show me how to do that.
That sounds like that would be a great person.
Yeah.
And I do hope that that opportunity will become available for you. And I think as people continue to hear your story, they'll see the value in what you have to share. And as I've told you, you are so articulate in being able to share what you've been through. And I think we need to just get right into your story.
Okay.
So you and I had talked about your childhood a little bit. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people that follow you on TikTok that they may not know much about your childhood. So do you want to start there?
Yes, I have not gotten into that. My focus has been primarily the trauma bond and the systematic stages of narcissism and the narcissistic abuse that the victims of these narcissists actually suffer from. I didn't go into my backstory too much. I think in one of the segments I did mention that, I had been abused by both of my parents. My biological father, not abused as far as like physically or anything like that, but it was complete abandonment and neglect. He was never in my life from the time I was, a toddler or before that. And so I didn't have him, present. We live in a very small town, and in my 20s and 30s, I would meet people in this small town, and they had no idea that he was even my dad. But they knew about the other two. One was his stepson, and one was the child that he had with my stepmom. But nobody ever knew about me, and I was actually the firstborn. So if that tells you anything, I was the kid that nobody knew even belonged to him. I didn't see him, no interaction. And every time that I've tried to reach out over the years, something always happened, so it just wasn't a positive experience. And I just had to, sometimes you just have to walk away. And even if that entails blood relatives, you have to do what you have to do for your own sanity, and you can't, just because you're family and they may be your mother, father, aunt, brother, sister, if it's a toxic situation and it doesn't bring you peace, you don't have to be ugly, but you do have to remove yourself sometimes, as painful as that is. So unfortunately, I have gotten really good at walking away from things. My mother, on the other hand, is bipolar. And I didn't have any idea about narcissism until my ex-fiance. But looking back on it now, there are some things that are, have been severely wrong with her. She was physically abusive to me at an early age. When I was 3 years old, she actually punched me in the stomach and would stuff socks down my throat at 3 and 4 and 5 years old. And I remember vividly, I was about 4, and I woke her up by playing with one of those Mickey Mouse things that you would pop up, and Goofy would pop up, and Minnie and Mickey and all of that, Pluto. And she got up and went by the fireplace and got one of those fire poker tools and came in there and smashed that toy in front of me to pieces. And I wasn't even in kindergarten yet. And she would say some really, really terrible things to me as a young child, that, she wished that she had never had me, and just things that you can't even imagine. And I just grew up, and I was her only child. I didn't have any siblings. So, early on, she was just, and I didn't know any different. The only reason I knew different is when I was in the 3rd grade, and we moved to a house. And this is how sad looking back as an adult now, it's easier to see things, in hindsight. And I mentioned that several times. We moved to a house in a neighborhood in this small town that I'm from. And I befriended, 3rd grade, I got on the school bus one morning, and there was a girl named Tiffany. And I asked if I could sit on the bus with her. And we were in the 3rd grade, and she scooted over, and we are still friends to this day. But I started going over to her house in the mornings. She lived right up the road from me, and she had a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad. And I remember walking in the back door. I got to where I would come to her house in the mornings, and we would catch the bus together. And I remember walking in the back door, and her mom was always up every morning. Her mom didn't work. She was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. And her mom would be cooking pancakes and coffee, and the house was alive. And I just thought to myself, how odd. Like, I didn't understand that. Is this the way things are supposed to be? So it dawns on you that your home life is vastly different from what it's supposed to be. And you realize growing up slowly that you were in an abusive situation. But I've always had a problem identifying with being a victim. I don't like that. I'd like to think that I'm stronger than that.
Yeah.
Oh, Angie.
It's okay. And y'all, you're going to hear some tears today, because the things that Liz has been through, they've been hard. But the beauty of you sharing this and you being so vulnerable is the healing that's taken place. And that's the beauty of a story, is even though it's bitter, it's got the sweet too. And that's definitely what I see in your story. So I traveled to see you today, which was fun. I always love taking a little road trip. Were you born and raised in Alabama?
I was. I was born in a little town called Sylacauga, but that's just the hospital that she ended up going to. But I'm originally from Alexander City, Alabama.
And are your mom and dad still currently living?
They are, but I don't have any contact with either one of them. I broke off the relationship with my biological father after the last attempt at trying to be a part of his life and his wife's life, and I'm just, I'm not a good fit there. I haven't spoken to him in 6 years, and I tried to keep my mother at a distance. She got hospitalized, and she's in really bad health. And me trying to, I guess it was selfish a little bit, because I didn't want her to pass and me have regrets of doing the wrong thing. But I tried to be there, when she, has been put in the ICU and all these health problems. But she just is emotionally and verbally abusive to me even still. No responsibility, no apology for anything that she's ever done. And I just can't, after what I've been through, I'm just, I isolate, I stay alone, I live alone, and I don't let people in, and I just, it's better to be alone than be abused.
Yeah.
So I don't have any contact with her either, and won't again. So
I know people who have been in situations that are similar to yours. They're not the same. And I see adult children who grapple with that. And what I've seen is some children who will just absolutely be bitter toward that abusive parent and have nothing to do with them. And then I've seen them take a more healthy route like you, which is what I'm hearing as I hear you talk about this, is that you love that parent because they are your biological parent.
right,
You don't love what they did to you, and you shouldn't, but you have to establish boundaries with that parent for your sanity.
100%. You don't have to tolerate, just because you love them. There's nothing that says you can't love them from a distance and wish them well, but you don't have to continue to put yourself in the path of destruction or, abuse or neglect or, just toxic situations and environments. And it has taken me, 40 something years to learn how to just to be okay alone, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not hard. Being alone and choosing to not be with anybody and not have family and not have friends, it's not for the weak. But I do feel like God will eventually, He will rebuild
Yes.
He will rebuild my life for the people that are supposed to, purposed in my life, whatever that looks like. And until then, I just have to faithfully wait for that to happen. But I do have severe trust issues, but I have established very hard and strong boundaries that I don't allow to be crossed anymore. And it has taken me over 2 years, Angie, to be able to even speak out about the narcissistic abuse that I have endured, but it's taken me over 40 years to publicly talk about my biological parents, and this is the first time I have publicly done that, is here on your podcast. I've never gone public about the horrible abuse that I did suffer at the hands of my mom for years.
And I thank you so much, honestly, for having the courage to share that.
Thank you.
I really do, because as I said, I know people who are younger than you that are adults now, and they're trying to figure out, how do I navigate this? And they're trying to figure out, as an adult, who am I after going through all that trauma? And how do I deal with all of that happened to me? It happened.
Yeah, it did. It did.
And you can't just ignore the fact that it happened.
You can't, but you also have to dig deep and pray to God for guidance and His grace and His mercy to not allow it to make you bitter. Because if you become that miserable person, you're going to abuse somebody else. You're going to be emotionally, traumatic to somebody else's existence, and you can't do that. I will tell you that one of the things of being abused by my mother and not loved ever by my mother, it did the opposite for me. I have 2 children, and I go above and beyond to make sure that those 2 have every single thing that they need. And I text them out of the blue, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're loved. Do you know how handsome you are? Do you know how beautiful you are? So it has done the opposite for me. I have turned that into being told, from a very early age. I think I was 7 the first time that my mother actually said that she hated me and that she wished that she had never had me. And I could have grown up and chose to be a dark person. But I can't do this podcast without giving credit to not only God, and God had a hand in this too, but I had a granny. It was my biological father's mother, and her name was Pearl Ayers, and that was my saving grace. That woman loved me well. She loved me with every fiber of her being, and she taught me to have a moral compass. And she raised me there's three things that she would always say to me. She said, Liz, the hardest thing that you're going to do in life is sometimes doing the right thing. And it's going to be so much easier to do the wrong thing to get people back for what they've done to you. And she said, you do the right thing anyway because it's the right thing to do. And she said, you be upright, straightforward, and honest. And, you know, I can never, ever thank that woman enough for the true, pure, unbounded love that she had for me. And she taught me, you know, she taught me how to love. And she took all that had happened to me with my biological parents, and she turned it into good. And I owe her a lot for the person that I turned out to be, because what had happened to me with, you know, the neglect from my father and the abuse from my mother, I could have turned to drug use. I could have ended up, you know, on some skid row with needles in my arm or, you know, something else. And instead, God allowed me to be a compassionate empath that just wanted to love other people the way that I had not been. So, you know, you turn the bad into good, and you spread that around for other people.
And when you were talking, it made me think, instead of staying a victim, you became a victor.
Oh, I don't really look at myself like that either. I guess I'm very appreciative for the humbleness, you know, because I will never think that I ever sit high enough to look down on anybody else. But the wonderful thing that I have realized with doing this TikTok that I never even imagined, like it never occurred to me for this to be a platform to help others. I just knew that I woke up one day and said, I'm just tired of being silent. I'm not going to allow, you know, my best friend that did the things that she did, and my narcissistic ex-fiance, you know, I'm allowing their behavior to go unexposed. I'm allowing them to abuse people in secret. And that is 100% most of the time what happens to the victims of narcissistic abuse, because the systematic abuse through the trauma bond and the gaslighting and the cognitive dissonance that takes place, it does silence the victim of the abuse, because you don't have the strength. The word salad keeps you in a state of confusion where you question your own sanity. You truly do. So you're not going to speak out, because you, for the most part, until you're out of it, think that you are the one that's crazy. So a lot of people suffer in silence from this. And, you know, from my TikTok, a lot of people know that after 7 years of the horrible abuse that I endured from him financially, emotionally, and physically, he turned around and sued me for finally, you know, having the courage to leave him, which was the hardest thing that I'd ever had to do, was to walk away from someone that I loved with every fiber. The only thing that I wanted was a life with that man. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm a saint and was perfect, because I'm human and I do make mistakes. But I was a good woman to him, and I loved him very well. And as a narcissist, he took full advantage of that purposefully and intentionally inflicted this pain, because that is what they feed off of. And people don't understand the system that this goes by. These people are very well, you know, versed in what they do. They've had years, decades to hone the craft of narcissism. And while it is a true personality disorder, mm-hmm. they are still fully aware of the horrible, soul-blinding pain that they are inflicting upon the one that they know truly, purely does love them. And that, to me, is just horrific. It's just horrific.
So let's go back to the beginning of that story. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I was thinking as you were talking is that, you know, things that are hidden in the darkness, when you bring them out to the light of God, one thing that God's always shown me is, Angie, Satan can't torture you with that anymore if you'll give it to me. Yeah. So if you'll bring it out in the light, I'll be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
And your story, for those who may not have heard everything going on TikTok, is about your relationship with somebody who I say has narcissistic personality disorder. So do you mind kind of talking about how that relationship got started and go from there?
Yeah, and it's one that I am not proud of, but I will be honest because I said I was not perfect. I was married to my ex-husband for 12 years, which is the father of my son, Cam, which everybody had met on my TikTok as well. We did a Q&A with my son because the narcissistic relationship that I had with this man lasted 7 years, from the time that my son had just turned 11 until he was a senior in high school. So this affected a large portion of his life, which I will forever have guilt. And I've asked God to help me forgive myself for what I've done. I had been married to his dad for 12 years, and we were good friends and we were good parents. We weren't always good spouses. Early on in our marriage, when my son was, younger than 2, when I had my son, and then over the course of maybe 6 to 8 months, maybe a year, my ex-husband had an affair with a woman that he had previously been involved with. And that just, it shook me to my core, because I knew that man loved me. I knew that he did. But he was human, and this is the difference between someone having an affair and someone being a narcissist. My ex-husband was not a narcissist. He fell to the world and the earthly, emotions that happen when we are under a large amount of stress. And we were in our 20s. He had just had, a new baby. Our son was premature in Birmingham. And I had started a job at Alabama Power and was traveling. And he had started a new company. So there was a lot of stress, and I'm not giving him grace, and I'm not making an excuse for what he did. But I do know the difference because people often think that just because someone has an affair, or they are, they commit infidelity, that they are narcissists, and it is not the same whatsoever.
I appreciate you talking about that, because I think the word narcissist gets thrown around a lot now, and it doesn't apply to every single person.
100%. I have spent, while I'm not clinically, have any initials behind my name.
I told you sure seem like you do.
Well, after, and I'll get back to what you asked me before, but after what had happened to me with Kevin, I was insane. I mean, shaved my head. I just didn't even recognize myself. I weighed 112 pounds. I'd been hospitalized with the beginning stages of kidney failure from the dehydration, not being able to eat. I mean, it physically makes you ill.
And you're talking about your relationship with the person who has the narcissistic personality disorder, not your husband.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure people were clear on that.
Yes,
yeah.
We're backtracking to tell you that this is how I became so educated on the personality disorder. I've always believed that you can't get over what you can't understand, because it does drive you insane. So I just dove in. I got in therapy immediately I was thankful by God again, leading me to a wonderful therapist that understood the ins and outs of what I had been through and what had happened to me. And I just started like blogs and diving into books and ordering everything and listening to, podcasts and other, clinicians that were trained in the field. And I listened and educated myself on the steps and the systematic abuse, the ins and outs, the different variations of narcissism. So with that being said, I'll go back to the beginning with my ex-husband, the affair that he had. It changed the landscape of our marriage. And we almost did divorce. He did file for divorce, and we ended up putting it back together and staying together for another 10 years, raising my daughter and our son together. But I never fully got over it, because I just couldn't understand how that man did that to me, knowing that he loved me. Now, at the same time, he is not a narcissist. I'm going to clarify that. He was a 24-year-old man that was under a great deal of stress with a woman that continued to come after him. And people are weak, and they do succumb to, in temptation. It is alive and well in the world. So fast forward to 10 years. We've now been married for 12, and my granny had passed, and I had lost my granny, and I was drinking a lot, and drinking alone, I will add. We did socialize and have a group of friends that, we partied. We're in our early 30s or mid 30s. I'll take that back, mid 30s, and the typical Southern tradition, riding dirt roads and, drinking beer on the weekends. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm, a saint, or that I'm not human and didn't make mistakes. And the marriage just became stressful, and we started, the distance was, it was there. And I got online one afternoon, and somewhere that I shouldn't have been, and something that I should not have done. And I had already planned to get a divorce. I had started getting rid of the things, our extracurricular, things in the yard that I knew that he wouldn't be able to pay for without me leaving. So I had already started putting that into order, leaving the right way. Not with someone else waiting in the wings. And the devil crept in and got a hold of me, and that's the only thing that I can equate that to. But at the same time, I'm going to admit to, my mistake and my wrongdoing. And I got online and created, a profile, and somewhere I never should have been. I should have done it the right way. And this man, here he comes, and it was Kevin, and just swooped me in fast and furious. And that should have been, red flag number one. But the love bombing takes a hold of you in such a way that the flags just, they're not there. You don't see them. And
so when you say love bombing, do you mean he swept you off your feet?
It's more than that. It is an intentional saturation of the attention that they know that being damaged before. They are very good at, like a hound dog, sniffing out vulnerable but strong, weak women. And I know that doesn't make sense, but strong vocal women, but they are also very weak and vulnerable because they do have past trauma of some sort, whether it be divorces or an ex-husband that was abusive. Like I came from the parents that were, neglectful and abusive. So they go for damaged, strong women that they know are very vulnerable, because they don't want a weak, passive-aggressive person, because they can't control, they have to find that happy medium. And they're very good at this, which makes the personality disorder that they have all that more dangerous. So he moved very quickly. We started talking online November of 2016. And by February of 2017, we had moved in together. He had moved to Alabama, and we had moved in together. So if you think about that, and, looking back on it now, yes, people are going to say, well, you were just insane and you deserved what you got and you should have known better. And I do hear these people. I understand what they are saying, because had you not have been through this and personally experienced this, there is no way to understand how a person could fall and be so naive to fall for something like this. But you have to truly understand intimately the dynamics of how this works. and the hundreds, and I can't even say hundreds, the thousands of people that have reached out to me on TikTok from Canada to New York to the Carolinas, on every coast of the United States. They have reached out to me, and this happens more often than people realize. These people understand, and that's my purpose now. It turned into me just trying to take control of what was happening to me, to now this has morphed into, I need to be a voice. I need to be a voice for the ones that can't speak until they are able to. And I think I mentioned before, it's taken me 2 years to be able to talk about this. And there's not enough awareness, Angie. There's not enough awareness, and it's not talked about enough how horrific this kind of intentional, diabolical, and it is evil. There is an evil entity that is absolutely at play in the souls of these narcissists. There's no other way to describe it. And if you have gone through it, and I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I wouldn't wish this on another living soul, no matter what they had done to me. I would not wish this on anyone, because it is truly evil what they do to you intentionally. You know, you think about taking a child, you know, a blind child that depends on you, that loves you completely, and just turning around and abusing that child horrifically. That's the same thing, because they manipulate you to where they ask you to quit your job. They want financial control over you. Over the years, they gaslight you. They smear campaign you to other people without your knowledge. And little by little, it's conditioned. You think about putting a frog in a warm pot of water and slowly turning up the heat on the stove. You know, what's going to happen? That frog is not going to jump out, because it gets tempered to that rise in temperature, and they're used to that. This is the same systematic abuse that a narcissist uses. It's not all at once, and it's little by little, and you don't even recognize what is happening to you, and they're slowly driving you insane. They are. And there have been CTs and doctors that have truly done MRIs in the victims that have been horribly abused by narcissists. And it is hard to believe, but it truly does affect the chemical makeup, and it causes actual brain damage in the victim. It's an addiction, and it is the same chemical addiction that is equivalent to horrible drug addiction. And that is what the trauma bond does. The trauma bond is actually equal to a horrible drug addict that has to have that hit every day. And this is why you get sucked back in time and time again, which is the stage called the Hoover. And they call it the Hoover because it is named after the vacuum. There's like 4 to 5 different stages of narcissistic abuse. The first one is the love bombing, where they are the best thing ever. They are chameleons, and they morph themselves into, they study you intently to like what you like, and to be your perfect mate, your knight in shining armor, everything that you had ever imagined, anything that you'd ever wanted. And they play that role just as if they are on stage in a play. They become that character that you needed so much. That's not who they are. They are playing a part, like Jekyll and Hyde or the Joker. And you have no idea. You just know that this person has showered you with love and affection and jewelry and trips and meals, and took all your troubles away and made your world shiny and new and bright. You have no idea the hell of your life that is going to befall you soon.
They are diabolical, but they're also very smart. So he saw something in you. And I know, I hear what you're saying, that you're strong, but then he could also see your vulnerabilities. And with the background that you came from, you had to have felt some rejection from your childhood. Mm-hmm. And so what we do when we feel rejection is we want to fill that void and feel needed and loved.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you didn't find that with your husband, this narcissist
Mm-hmm.
picked up on these things when he saw your profile online.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he saw that helped him pick out these vulnerabilities in you?
They know what questions to ask. They know how to get a landscape of your life and what you need, and you open up to them. They know how to get you to open up to them. And then they learn exactly what kind of person you are and what you've been through. And they're predators. They are predators. And they prey on good supply. And they will go after good supply. I didn't find this out until the end of our relationship. And you don't find out the entire rubble that you're standing in until you step back and you're out of it. And then you truly understand what they have done to you. And it takes you literally cannot wrap your head. It is beyond comprehension. I didn't know this until the very, very end. I saw the text messages when I found, I stumbled across everything, which was the worst day of my life. There was a woman that he was actually living with at the time that he met me online, and he was checking that out. He was testing that water to see if she was going to be a supply. And then I came into the picture, and then he discarded her to pick up with me, and I had no idea about her whatsoever. I didn't know that he was even involved with someone, and this girl's name was Vicky, and she moved to Florida shortly after that. But he, I saw the text messages that, the whole building knows that you're cheating on me, and I need to get my taxes and all my stuff out of your apartment. And he never mentioned one word about another woman or her at all. And later I found out that I found other text messages from like 5 or 6 other different women, and he was hunting. He was literally like you're trying to find that buck, that big, the best deer out in the woods. He was hunting, and lucky me.
So everything with him started off just seemed wonderful. You were getting lavished with gifts, and he was just telling you how wonderful you are, and you guys are so in love. And how long did it take you before you figured out it wasn't everything you thought it was going to be?
Years.
It was years.
And that's why I tell you that it's like a frog in the warm water. It does take you years, because you don't see it. You feel like there may be a couple of things that are off.
That you maybe were questioning, but you thought, no, that couldn't be.
You can't put your finger on them, but you brush it away because there's 100 things over here that you're so in love with, but there's 3 or 4 things over here that don't make sense. What are you going to focus on? You're going to focus on the 100, the pile over here of the wonderful, every charismatic. They are wildly charismatic. They are charming. They're good at this. This is their life. And the most interesting thing about this is there are 2 things that they fear most, and this is across the board for any narcissist. There's levels. There's covert, there's overt, and malignant. And there are 3 different types of narcissism out there. Mine happened to actually be one of the worst kind, which is the covert. And the covert narcissist is truly the most diabolical, because they are covert means, they're in hiding.
Yeah.
And they are undercover, and they do this so well. And it's all a sham, so they know what they're doing. And this man told me, you are the love of my life, the best thing that ever happened. I can't believe that, I found you. And I mean, within 6 months, he, and I'll say made me, because he wouldn't have let up. He made me quit my job. so he could exact, financial control over me. And then, slowly the isolation started to where I was completely, utterly 110% dependent on him,
And I remember you saying on your TikTok that his business was actually located in Ohio?
Yes. He is originally from Racine, Wisconsin, but him and his business partner owned a direct TV company through AT&T out of North Royalton, Ohio. So they had people that worked for them, 30 something employees that they had a door-to-door team. They traveled to all these home and garden shows selling, home security equipment, cell phones, and direct TV. So they were the two owners, and then they had all these people under them that sold all of this, home entertainment and home communications and all of that. Those shows, they went to fairs, state fairs, just events everywhere. So he flew me all over the United States and some parts of, we went to the Bahamas, we went to Montego Bay and Mexico a couple of times, Port of Vallarta, Canada, Niagara Falls. The man, he took me to some of the finest restaurants in the States, fillets and lobster and jewelry and diamonds and Louis Vuitton purses, and I'm telling you, he pulled out all the stops. And this is not always the case, because 100% of them don't have the financial means to do this. But in his case, he did, which gave him more power to do this worse, if that makes sense. Like, we had a condo, I'll say it was his condo that he maintained in Brunswick, Ohio, while he lived with me in Alabama part-time. So he flew out every single week to work in Ohio and had that condo up there. And Angie, this entire time from the very beginning, he was never faithful to me, not one single day. And I learned that in the very end. This man had escort services that he would call and order women, prostitutes, random women from shows that would come back to his hotels that he traveled to that I knew nothing about. And he would FaceTime me every night after he had relations with these women or before. And sometimes I looking back on it now, I think that there'd been a couple of times to where there'd been a couple that were even laying next to him as he FaceTimed me in the condo that I would, that essentially, I guess if you want to call it our condo, that, when I flew up there up north to be with him on the week, during the week sometimes before he came home, he would have these women in that same bed and in the same condo. And it just, I just can't, I still can't understand how you could do this to another human being. And I'll admit sometimes I blamed myself that I deserved it because I left. I ended my marriage the wrong way. So I have begged God on my knees to forgive me for what I've done, but I don't believe that anybody truly 100% deserves this level of prolonged abuse.
No.
My children were involved. My son was hurt. And I take responsibility for the part that is owed to me. But I know deep down that this was just, it was terrible that I crossed his path and I was on his radar, and that I developed a 7-year relationship with this man that ended, with involving me in horrific abuse for years. I shared a couple of pictures on TikTok the first year that we were together. And again, people are going to say, why didn't you just leave? And you can't understand that unless you've been in it. But I had to go to the emergency room one night for the physical abuse that his business partner's wife and her mom had to take me to the Cleveland Clinic because he had damaged my arm so bad that he thought he had broken it. And the bruising on it lasted for months. And I still, to this day, have nerve damage in my left hand and arm from what he did to me. Contusions on my biceps and on my shoulders and my arms that would take months to go away. Bruises that would be almost black and purple that my son and my aunt had seen in person. And marks around my neck from where he would choke me almost to unconsciousness. So for people to tell you that, you deserve that.
No, nobody deserves that. And even though we make mistakes, you still don't deserve that kind of treatment ever. So what is somebody thinking when this is happening to them? Because, it starts off, as you said, you have the love bombing, and then you start to see a few things, but you're thinking, no, it can't be as bad as I think. But then when the physical abuse starts, what are you thinking at that point? Are you thinking that, oh, this is going to get better and I've done something that caused this? What's going through that woman's mind or that man's mind? Because we know both men and women can be involved with somebody who has this disorder.
I'm glad that you clarified that, because I don't want the men out there that are listening to think, well, gosh, this happened to me and this is just a woman's problem. I'm glad that you said that, because this is not, this does not have any kind of race or sex discrimination whatsoever. This happens to men. However, it has been statistically shown and proven that a greater number of men do suffer from this personality disorder than women do. But there are women out there that do have narcissistic personality disorder. So in my case, and I can only speak for my case, the physical abuse escalated over the years. So the first time that he did this was St. Patrick's Day 2017, and my daughter was actually in Ohio with us when it happened, and I had to go to the hospital, and she was like, oh my gosh, Mom. But again, I'm going to go back to the love bombing, that it overshadows everything else. And I know people are going to say, I'll be darned, somebody ever puts my hand. But again, you have to understand the dynamic of what occurs. It is emotional abuse that is conditioned you, and it happens very quickly. And then over the years, the conditioning gets worse, and the longer you stay, the worse you are conditioned. The gaslighting, the word salad that they use on you, and the word salad is turning everything back on you. It's your fault.
Your fault, not their fault.
They play the victim, and they 100% they play the victim. They will never, they're not self-aware. That's one of the traits of narcissism, is they lack complete self-awareness. They have no empathy, and they have no compassion. They are unable to feel empathy or love for another person. They don't even love themselves, to be honest with you. So in my case, this wasn't every week. It didn't even happen every month. I think it was probably a year, before he put his hands on me again. It increased, and so that was 2017, and there were episodes or incidences where it would happen where he would throw me across the room, or stuff like that. But putting his hands on me, or the actual choking and the bruising, escalated in the latter years. So 2020 was when it started escalating, when his world was starting to come apart and the narcissistic collapse was starting to take hold. So if it's not every day, and it's just, it's easy for you to say, well, we had an argument, or, this and that. And in my case, again, narcissists they all have patterned traits. I mean, it is a pattern, and you can pick them out, and they are all alike. But there are differences. So I'm not going to just rope me into saying everybody suffers the same levels, but everybody that has been through narcissistic abuse will relate to exactly what I'm saying, and a lot of what I'm saying. But I will say that in my case, he was 6'2", 250 pounds, with a muscular build. He had played football, his whole life. And I am 5'1", with heels on, and 125 pounds soaking wet. So it was nothing for this man to just pick me up with one hand and throw me across the room. He was also an avid steroid user. And I know this because I gave them to him every week. He injected anabolic steroids into him that he would get off the black market, off the internet.
So we've all heard of steroid rage.
Yeah.
So do you think that the abuse was coming from him taking steroids?
No. They are hereditary. I mean, they are known to be aggressive people. They hide that. But they are aggressive people anyway. They're hateful people. They harbor hatred. But it's certainly added to the level of aggression. And, he was very, very, very extremely good at controlling his emotions. They do.
So when he was in the public.
Oh, no, ma'am.
People would see him and they're like, wow, what a nice guy. Yeah.
What an amazing businessman. He's got his stuff together. My family, what little family I have left, I have 2 aunts and a couple of cousins. And my Aunt Susie has said to me 1,000 times, if she said it once, Liz, he had us fooled. He had us he had that wool pulled right over our eyes. I mean, I'm talking about, Angie, we did the camping trip. He carved the pumpkins with my son. We bought a camper and camped with the family. I mean, to the public, you can't get any better. You cannot get a better person. Knight in shining armor. But, it rings true that if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. But they do. They play the perfect role to the public and to all your friends and everybody that knows you. You're the problem. You're the problem. He was a wonderful man. You must be the problem. But that is intentionally what they do from right out of the gate.
So somebody that would be an overt narcissist, would that be somebody that you see out in public and you just kind of do the eye roll and go, oh, brother, here they come again. They're so stuck on themselves, but you wouldn't see that in the covert narcissist.
Exactly. So the overt narcissist, they are more boisterous about their accomplishments. They talk about themselves. Hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. But they also do it in a manner that people don't really, they don't pick up on it. You might a little, but you just think, oh, he's full of himself, Mm-hmm. So it's too masked as, people don't know off the bat that's a narcissist, And you did, hit on something earlier. It does irritate me, the way that people throw this, this label around, because I truly know how to identify it now and wish that I never knew how to identify it. But it is very easy to just say, there are bad people out there. There are just bad people. It doesn't necessarily make all bad people a narcissist. There is a difference. I mean, there's a formula, like a recipe, like a casserole, or, you have to have certain components for it to truly be a textbook narcissist.
What about the malignant narcissist? That was the other one you mentioned.
So that is where they are just like a cancer, if you will, and it spreads and spreads, and they are not they're not exactly boisterous and they're not covert, but they still do as much damage. And I have not had personal one-on-one experience with a malignant, but they're called malignant for a reason, because what does that equate to? People think of malignant cancer, a malignancy, and that just is like a disease that gets in you and it just festers. Mm-hmm. So the suffering it's all horrendous and it's all terrible, but they are like a cancer. And as far as their outward personality traits, I can't personally speak to that, but no level of this, it's just horrific all the way around, no matter which one that you get. I do know from the research and the education that I've done on my own trying to figure this out, is the levels of it. The covert makes it the most dangerous because they are hidden. The malignant and the overt are not so much behind. They still appear to have it all together, but they're not hidden as well as the covert, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And just thinking about Kevin too, because I always go back to childhood, and I think there's so many things that we'll carry from our childhood into our adulthood, and you've had some positive things happen to you from negative things that happened in your childhood. But some people, again, they never get over that. So to your knowledge, were there things that happened to him in his childhood that could have caused him to act this way?
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up too, because there are two, and I don't want to confuse people to where they get a pass because they have a disorder. And I don't know how to explain it to someone unless you just researched it and truly understood it. But there are two things that creates a narcissist, and it does happen in early childhood, and as they grow up, and puberty and their preteens is where it starts to develop, and it actually they start to hone the craft of narcissism. But it does happen in early childhood development, but they are not, a 5 or 6 or 7 year old is not necessarily, they're not full-blown narcissist yet. But they are predisposed to it and will become that narcissist within puberty and then in their teens as they grow up. What creates this is two different things. Significant abuse and neglect from a parent that is more than likely a narcissist themselves, or the polar opposite, which is called the golden child, where they can do no wrong. In Kevin's case, and this is crazy because this cause is actually clinically written in a lot of blogs and podcasts and papers that have been written by clinicians, that the golden child is one of the coins that they do, a term that they do coin and use in explaining narcissism. And it never, and again, going back, I didn't know anything about narcissism until after I'd suffered this and got out of this. For years, when every time we went home to his family, Thanksgivings and Christmas, they called him the golden child. And after I educated myself and I learned that that was actually a clinical textbook term that was used with therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, I just literally gasped out loud, because I had heard him called that 1,000 times by every member of his family. Oh, well, he's the golden child. So his mother got pregnant with him at 15 and had him at 16. And so they essentially grew up together. And his grandparents had a huge role in his upbringing. His grandfather, and his mom was young, but I can't really say he could do no wrong. She was closer to him than anybody else. She went on to have 3 other children, but Kevin was her, he was in his 40s and she was in her 50s. I mean, how odd is that? So they were close, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, Kevin could do no wrong. You know, whatever advice Kevin gave was always right. And, you know, the other 3 kids, you know, were just her other 3 kids. And then, you know, Kevin was her little celebrity. You know, he'd gone on to own this successful business and made all this money, and, you know, was just 6'2", and this football player that was in all the papers. And, you know, he played semi-pro football for a while. He almost, you know, he was on the path to go to the pros, and that didn't happen for, you know, one reason or another. But he was her star, you know, that, you know, she was proud of him and boasts on him. And so what happens in both of these cases, whether they are the golden child or whether they are significantly neglected and abused, there is a break in their identity. They don't have one. So they are skewed in having, like, who are they, you know, what they're, so that's why they pick you out, because if you think of it as a puzzle, they lack empathy, they lack compassion, and they do not love. So they need you to pull those pieces from to make them whole. You are their facade. You are their smoke and mirrors. You are what needs to be the home front to make them look normal to the outside world. They know something is wrong with them. They don't identify with narcissism, because that would mean self-awareness, and they don't have any self-awareness. But they know something is wrong with them, but they can't put their finger on it, and they're not going to label it. There was a couple of times where, you know, he would make the comment, you know, I know I have issues, but they are so evil and so out for just themselves and what they need to do to supply this image, that they're not gonna, you know, they're not gonna work on themselves. And interestingly enough, and I have I've spoken with several therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists. 9 times out of 10 refuse to treat them. It is not a treatable disorder. And you know, some may beg to differ with me, but my own therapist that has a master's in all of this and behavioral and personality disorders, she said the same thing. She said, Liz, you just can't, you know, because they don't have self-awareness. So you can't help someone that doesn't
who won't take responsibility for their own behavior.
They don't see a problem with it.
Yeah.
They just don't see a problem with it. So,
and you use the term supply. So I want people to understand too that when they look at a woman or they look at a man, again, because we know it does affect both sexes, that's what you're referring to. You're referring to that victim that they've chosen, that they've picked out, so that they can, like you said, put on this facade to everybody. And this is the person who's going to help me play theater here and show everybody how great I am and how wonderful everything is between the two of us.
It is all about their image. So there's 3 things that they care about: their image, sex, and money. And that you have to have, you know, they have to have you to supply that image. And I call us supply because we are not human to them. They have no remorse whatsoever for the emotions, for the absolute horrific pain that they cause you. They know that they are going to absolutely destroy you. They intentionally are going to destroy every part of you because they need those parts of you. But while they are using those parts of you up, they're sucking the life out of you from the abuse that they are inflicting on you in order to get that supply. Because a reaction from you is their supply. And you are, you know, that's why they cheat with all of these others, because those others can't supply them with the home front, is what I call it. The picket fence, the wife that has the children, or the woman at home that takes care of them, that allows them to continue to look like they are all put together. but they also have to cheat because they have to feed that supply that they are grandiose, that they are wanted by all these women, because the two things that they fear the most is rejection and exposure. They are broken babies. And that is another clinical term because it happens in early childhood. It develops in early childhood, but it doesn't surface or make known until, after puberty to the early teens and into their 20s. So it's actually called broken babies, and that's what they are. They have the emotional intelligence of a toddler.
So they got stymied at that age.
Yes. And they lack identity. And you are their identity. You are their curtain. You are Oz behind the curtain.
That's such a good way to describe it. So you got to the point, and I know you posted a picture of your shaved head on TikTok. And of course, I think for everybody, you think about Britney Spears when you say something like that. But my gosh, I mean, you're a beautiful woman. What got you to the point where you just did that? It's like were you trying to hide? Were you punishing yourself? What was going on there?
And this is going to be emotional because you lose your mind. You are grasping at what to do because you have no idea what just happened to you. You literally stand there in the rubble of what was your life or what you thought was your life, and understand this. You were the one that was in the relationship. The love was real for you. The life that you had was real. The love that you feel for this person that never even existed was real. What you felt was real. And to be smacked in the face with the fact that you loved this person with every fiber in your being, and to finally have the mask of him ripped or her ripped off, and to be able to fully see that you never mattered. You were not a human being to them. You were not a person to them. You were nothing more than something they needed to use until they discard and move on to the next one. And I can't even put into words what that emotionally does to you. And while the physical abuse that I went through, sporadically over the years was horrible, it pales in comparison. To what he did to me emotionally. You lose yourself. So you're trying to start over and you don't know how to do that. And I had a woman reach out to me the other day that said that she actually did the same thing and shaved her head. And I can't explain it other than the fact of you're trying to find, you're trying to feel something. You're trying to start over. You're trying to, you don't know what to do. And you're insane. I mean, you are temporarily insane and you're just trying to get you're grounded, you're trying to place your feet, find your footing again. So the first time he left was in October of 2022, and November is when I shaved my head. But saying that, what do you do when you can't stand anymore? You kneel, and I had no idea what to do, and I went to church. I just grabbed my Bible and I just went to church, and because God was going to have to save me from suffering the same fate that his second wife succumbed to, because she did not survive. She did not survive the abuse that she was put through, and
so to be clear, she killed herself.
She did. She committed suicide in their home with a shotgun to the abdomen. And he actually pulled up to the house as the coroner and all of them were there pronouncing her with the new supply in the vehicle with him. If that tells you the depravity of what they truly are.
This is mind control.
Yes.
At the greatest level.
100%. 100%. And people don't understand it. You think about to equate it to like a concentration camp or something like that, and it is mental abuse on the most sadistic level. But Angie, I got baptized that December 2022. I gave my life to the Lord and I got baptized because He was the one that was going to save me from this. I could not do this by myself. And the lake house that I talked about that we leased after I sold the house, I talk about how all of the real estate and everything had to be put in my name because of the liability. He wanted all the liability. They keep their distance from any kind of anything that could backlash on them. So they use you.
So he appeared financially stable on the surface, but was he?
He had a lot of money coming in, but I had no idea at the time that he owed the IRS, the federal government. He was in debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS because he was above, paying taxes, and he just didn't. And how he evaded tax, the tax evasion for so long is unbeknownst to me. But he used me for that too. He filtered money, through my name and put me on payroll and financially control all of that. So he had access to 100% of everything, but I had 100% of the liability.
So you end up being a prisoner in your own home, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize that the person that you thought you loved is not that person at all.
Yeah.
That they're quite sadistic.
You end up falling in love with the mirror image of yourself because you are a good-hearted, you are genuine. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't done bad things and hurt people in my life, that if I could go back and undo 1,000 times, I would. But I am human and I have made mistakes. But I have not deserved the level of what I stumbled into with this man. But this is what you fall in love with. You fall in love with the mirrored image of you, and that is what they do. It's mirroring, and that's what they do. They mirror you because they have to be your perfect mate.
And that was the whole thing about Narcissus, right? The Greek god, didn't he couldn't stop looking at himself in the mirror. I need to go back and read that whole story, but that's where that comes from, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
you fall in love with an illusion.
Yeah, an illusion. That's a good way to put it.
But in your heart, I mean, you love what you thought this person to be, and it creates a trauma bond that is, I mean, it's so hard to break free. It is so hard to leave. It is so hard to get away from. And he and I didn't have children together. Can you imagine the men and women that suffer through this, that have children with these people? And Angie, they don't even love their own children. They can't.
Yeah.
They even use their own children as pawns in their chess game of their sadistic life chess game and supply. And they will pit the children against the other parent and use them as pawns, not caring whatsoever about the emotional abuse and sometimes even physical that they inflict on their own children.
Yeah. I know people who have been in situations like that, and the kids get turned against their parents by that narcissistic parent, and it's hard to...
and it's used to inflict the maximum amount of pain on the other, on their supply.
And really, that's why he has a suit against you now. It's more about continuing to inflict pain on you than it is about proving that he's right about something.
100%. So a stage in this, there is love bombing, and then there is the devaluing stage, and then there's the Hoover where they pull you back in, and the discard. The narcissist needs to be the one to discard. In our case, And don't ask me how, but I gathered the strength enough to end the relationship, not once, but twice. I will admit, we reconciled for just a little while, and that's when the world come crashing down, when we reconciled, and for 3 months, and he came back home and moved back in, is when I stumbled across the truth of what he was, and the mask had slipped before, but this time the whole thing was ripped off, because I saw things on his computer that I can't unsee in a life, years and years and years of photos and videos and emails by the thousands of an entire secret life that he had. So I discarded him not once but twice, and that sends them into an absolute, like, they can't handle it. That's rejection. Mm-hmm. And I told you the two things that they fear the most is exposure and rejection.
Yeah.
In 2020, he and I were just having a talk one day, and I would sometimes randomly ask him questions, and I asked him one day, and I remember vividly back on this, in that hindsight, because I've just played everything back in my head, and this is what drives you insane, because you go back over your whole life, and then things you can pick out that were so clear, that you should have picked up on, but while you're in it, you just can't. You're in a fog. You're in a fog, and that's that trauma brain that I don't want people to blame themselves, because it's your brain protecting you from remembering, that, and it is called trauma brain because it is a fog. But I distinctly remember asking him one afternoon, I said, what do you fear most in life? And without any hesitation whatsoever, he not even, stop, pausing for a breath, he said rejection, without any hesitation. And so he came after me with a vengeance, and they love the court system. It's a common tool that they use to torture you. And unfortunately, the Tallapoosa County court system has no idea what this man has truly done to me. And in a small town, sometimes, unfortunately, the good old boy system, is at play. And, it's just the nature of the beast, if you will. And it's not publicly known what I have suffered through from this man, what my son has suffered through from this man. And the fact that he is using the Tallapoosa County court system of Alabama to further inflict this amount of pain and abuse and torment on me is unreal. And this court battle has been going on for over a year and a half now, and has cost me tens of thousands of dollars. And that's what he wants. That is their goal. That is their lot in life. They want to destroy you and leave you with absolutely nothing. And that, they get off on that, and they truly enjoy the pain that they're causing you.
So one of the questions that you get asked the most often is, how do you leave?
You get your Bible out and you pray to the good Lord to give you the strength and to hold your hand and to pull you out of this hell that has become your life. And if you do have children, and I did not have children with him, thank God, but I had a 17-year-old, he was 16 at the time. I had a 16-year-old boy that needed me. And my son stood in the kitchen one night at that lake home, and my son is aware of the fate that happened to the second wife. And a conversation with Kevin after we got back together, and then the second and final breakup, he actually admitted to knowing the whole story of the second wife, but didn't care whatsoever about any kind of responsibility that he played. And I'll get into that later if you'd like. But my son, knowing what happened with that, and I'll be completely transparent here and honest with you, there were not days, but there were weeks where I was unable to get out of bed. I prayed to God to please not let me wake up. Because I could not bear it. The pain was more than what I was able to control. It felt like it was more than what I was able to pray away. And I even spent hours on my knees praying for this man, for God to please change his heart. God, please let me have this man. Please help change him and put this back together and give my life back to me, and it just wasn't meant to be. But my son was standing in the kitchen with me one afternoon in that lake house with tears in his eyes, and he looked at me and he said, "Mama, I need you. Please don't leave me." And I knew what he was asking me not to do. And I can't even tell you how surreal to stand there and have your 16-year-old son ask you not to do that. It just, I can't put into words, and you have to find the strength somewhere. You have not only for your children, and if you don't have children, you have to know that your value is more than what you're able to see right now. Your worth has been shattered. Your value has just been thrown away, and that's what they do. They throw you away like garbage, like none of the years that you spent with them and that you gave every single piece of you to them ever mattered to them, and that you are nothing but trash beneath their feet. That does something to the way that you look at yourself in the mirror. You don't matter, and you're not worth anything, and you are just garbage, and that's what it makes you feel like. But you have to find the strength to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm a human being, and I am on this earth for a purpose, and I've been put here by God himself, planned for me to have a life, and there is still breath within me. And grab, this is what my granny always used to say, Liz, you have to grab those bootstraps and you have to pull them up. And you have to pull those bootstraps, and you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to grab your self-worth and your value back and look at yourself and say, I'm going to learn to love me again. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to lie to anybody and tell you that you're going to be okay in 6 months, or you're going to be okay in a year, or you're going to be okay in 2 years, because you're not. And how could you be? If you've suffered through years of this abuse, it takes this is a long journey, and it is the loneliest journey that you will ever have to overcome, because your family and your friends do not understand this, and sadly enough, you don't want them to, because if they did, and if they could understand it, then that means that they would have experienced it firsthand, and that is the only way to understand this. So you don't want them to. And that's what I've learned by sharing my story, is that you feel utterly and completely alone, which is why it drives so many to do that and to take themselves out, and they don't survive this kind of abuse because there is no one to talk to. Your best friend doesn't understand. And in my case, she was actually, she'd had an affair on her husband for years, and she ended up, having sexual relations with my fiance behind my back for a long extended period of time, that they had been, meeting at various different places, for just sex with each other. And it was the attention for her, and it was the supply for him, because COVID had happened and the travel, had gotten stifled for him. So he wasn't able to meet, with his online, sites and the sex sites that he'd been on. And he wasn't able to get that supply outside of the home from somewhere else. So, she and him started a sexual relationship that lasted for a while. right under my nose while I am working as her assistant. And I would actually go and show houses for her because I do have a license. So she's a well-known realtor in Tallapoosa County in Alexander City, Alabama. And I'd known her for over 10 years, and we had become very close. And I, named her my best friend. And she ended up doing that to me. So while I was out showing homes and selling $1 million properties for her, making her money, he had me on Life 360. And they would send me to a house, a ways away that she would have me show. So they knew where I was, showing house for her while she was in the bed having sex with him.
What does that do to your trust?
I am alone. I have two women that I talk to, and one I have known for more than 30 years, and one that has truly been a godsend. I truly believe, just as you were sitting here in front of me, that God purposed this woman in my life. Her name is Melanie Breen, and she lives on Lake Martin, and she lived in the same lake community that lake home was located in. And she actually met Kevin. She and I actually met on the off chance at a luncheon for the women of that community. And God knew what he was doing, because it was one of the only, I think I went to maybe 2 of those luncheons. And the very first one that I went to was, she hosted it at her house. And God knew that I would need her later. And she actually invited Kevin and I over to her and her husband's home when he was on leave from the military. And we had dinner over there. And that was right before all hell was about to break loose in our relationship. So she did get to actually meet Kevin. And then my life fell apart. And she had no idea what I was dealing with, or the horrific things that had been done to me. And even then I didn't know. I would not find out the extent and the magnitude of what he had done until June 21st of 2023. And it's a day that I won't ever forget.
That's not that long ago.
No. So it's been 2 years, October, since the first initial breakup, but it has actually been June 21st of 2023 that my entire world fell apart.
And just for context, we're recording this on November 13th, 2024.
Yes.
So people who may listen to this in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But Liz, I just, I want people who are hearing this today to hear you that, you do not have to stay in this situation. And if somebody out there is in a similar situation to what you went through, and you can get out of it, that's probably the hardest step, right? It's kind of like going to the gym. It's like once you step foot in that gym, you've done the hardest part. And would you say that's true as somebody who's looking to get out of a situation like this? It's just taking a step and just, whether it's reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, I need to come stay with you, or, someone they can trust, or just getting out of that situation, just making a step to do so is the hardest thing.
The first step is leaving, and that's the hardest thing to do. I'll say the hardest. It's one of the hardest, the true hardest thing to do. And it was, it gutted me. And when I tell you it gutted me, it gutted me. I had to go no contact. And when you have to go no contact with the very thing that you crave, like a drug, like somebody that had been putting needles in their arms forever, that, are trying to go to rehab, like, you have to daily, it is not even a daily, it is minute by minute, you have to go no contact. And it is the hardest thing that you will ever have to force yourself to do, minute by minute, because the only thing that you want is attention from them. You want to hear that this was not real, and that they do truly love you, and that they are sorry. But you have to keep telling yourself the truth, and you have to make yourself face the truth that they do not love you. It is not real. What you want and what you are craving from them never existed. You never had it. You love yourself that they mirrored in you. And the first thing that I would tell someone to do is therapy. You have to find a therapist, because again, you are alone. Your friends and your family don't understand it, because they commonly, this is across the board. Well, just leave, or well, everybody, it was just cheating, or well, everybody has an affair, or people cheat all the time. This is not just infidelity. This is not just a breakup. This is not just a divorce. This is none of that. It is not even on the same scale as a spouse committing adultery, or a breakup, or a divorce, or a separation. This is nowhere near on the same scale of that. This is breaking free from an absolute sadistic monster that has brainwashed you and mentally abused you for years with a system of calculated methods to drive you to insane, to where you don't even recognize yourself. So this is something entirely different that you have got to overcome, and it is almost impossible. But I'm sitting here, so it is possible. But I was fortunate enough to find a good therapist, and don't be ashamed or shy to reach out to your therapist and interview them and ask them. My first day meeting the therapist, I asked her 3 hard questions, and this was important to me. I wanted to know how old she was. I wanted to know if she knew anything about, narcissism, and I wanted to know, had she ever experienced real trauma in her life. And this is your life. This is your life that you're going to have to take back, and hopefully this is your story that you're going to be able to tell, that it helps other people too one day. So be intentional and be forceful with what you need, because you need somebody. And I'm not discriminating, but I felt in my case as a 40 plus year old woman, I'm not going to sit there and talk to a 26 or 27 year old that just graduated, that yes, they have clinical background and they've read the terminology. I needed someone with life behind them, and that was just my need. That was my personal need. I needed someone that had experienced pain and trauma in their life. I needed someone that knew wholeheartedly what real trauma pain felt like, and she'd been through a horrific, divorce and that kind of thing. Not necessarily narcissistic abuse, but she was trained and understood it. And she was, 40, late 30s, 40. So she had some life experience under her belt, and I needed someone that I was going to be able to connect with, and that's important. Yeah. So this was my criteria, and again, these were my boundaries that I'm setting, and that's another key factor. You have to start setting boundaries. So therapy, no contact, and hard boundaries. And I'm not going to lie and say that these are easy. These are not easy feats.
That's very practical, though. And I want to encourage people, too, that if they're going through this and they haven't followed you yet on social media, and I know you're going to get, I know you've already gotten a lot of messages and you respond to the ones that you can. But the great thing about social media is I know that you're able to address some of those questions that maybe several people have sent you. And certainly, like you said, one of the biggest ones that you've gotten so far is how do you leave? And you just did such a great job of addressing that. And so, yeah, I know you're on TikTok. And so people look for Watermelon Sugar is your...
Yeah, it's Watermelon Sugar High, and my icon to know that it's me, because there's several. And I've been asked about that terminology, and I had no idea what that even meant at that time. And Angie, it's not good, so we won't go there. But So forgive me for what I named it.
I had no idea. So
me either. But it's been brought to my attention. But I chose that name because I just love the song. Naively, not even understanding the backstory. But and I'll let people who know, and if they want to dive into that. But that certainly was not my direction. But I just thought the song was very upbeat, and it reminded me of summer. Just light, and I just needed something positive and that just sounded like summertime and fun. So I chose Watermelon Sugar High because I liked the song. So you will know how to recognize me because it's got an icon of a watermelon, a half of a watermelon, and then it's got the scrolled Watermelon Sugar High. So you will find me there. And I'll go ahead and let you know that I have completely allowed myself to be very raw and vulnerable and exposed on this TikTok platform because I felt like I needed to be 100% truthful with everything that I was sharing about my experience. I have not chose to share the whole backstory of the ex-husband and the way that I left him and, that situation of what led into meeting Kevin, because people can be so judgmental and harmful and hurtful. And I needed to get my message out there to help people. And I would not be able to do that if I was being persecuted for the mistakes that I made in the beginning by leaving my husband for this man and doing it off of a dating site that I never should have been on as a married woman. So for that, I take 110% responsibility for. And it just was not conducive or important to share that on TikTok so that people would start to blame me off the bat before they understood the journey that so many others were going through and had suffered the same abuse, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I just think you have gone through this so well, and I think you're continuing to go through this so well. And it takes a lot of courage to rip that Band-Aid off and share what you have. But to repeat what we talked about earlier, those things that are left hidden in the dark are the things that Satan can torment us with. Mm-hmm. But when we bring them out into God's light, that's when God can bring healing to them. And he says, I've got them now.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you so much. It has been such an honor and a privilege. Thank you for welcoming me, a stranger, into your home.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out to me. And, they say that there is purpose in pain, and we don't learn from the joyous moments in life. They are fleeting, and, we move on to the next. But the pain that we suffer in life is what builds us, and what molds us, and it builds character. And while it's incredibly heart-wrenching, and the suffering sometimes is more than what we think that we can bear, there is purpose in pain. And if you turn the bad that has happened into good, and you allow God's will and his leading, to lead you to help other people, then you use that suffering and you use that pain to help pull others out of the darkness that about. So if I know what the dark room and the dark depth of that pit feels like, and there's so many out there that are alone in that pit, and I can extend my arm down knowing full well what they are going through to pull them out of that, wouldn't it be worth it?
Amen. And there's a scripture too that says God sets the lonely in families. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we do need to be alone in our pain because we have things to work through. But God is faithful. He will never leave us, and he will never forsake us.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage people too, if you're not following me yet on social media, you can find me on TikTok at Red Hills Girl. I'm on Facebook at Revealed Podcast, and on Instagram at Revealed Story.
Thank you.